Start with you, Sue Amanga from Pink Progress. You've looked at the numbers. I mean, you've studied them, many times before. What are your thoughts on representation of women, both in private and public sector?
Well, the key thing is that the trend is the same globally. Kenya, as you've seen, is doing very badly. It's ranked number 76 in terms of women representation in parliaments. And
yet still better than the US.
And still better than the US. And that's why in countries like the US, they've got this drive that's called the 2020, which aims at getting 20% women representation by the year 2020. There's also the 30% Club, which is a European initiative by chairmen of companies who want to ensure that they'll have 30% representation of women in the private sector.
Yes.
In Kenya, the scenario is pathetic because, I mean, you've seen the statistics from Hussein there that out of 62 companies that are listed in the stock exchange, in the Nairobi Securities Exchange, we have only 5 women chairmen. 5 out of 62, that's pathetic. And then only 13% or thereabout of women sit in corporate boards. And that's why for us at Pink Progress, we decided to agitate for this, to encourage, inspire, mentor women
to take up leadership roles.
I'll
come back to you, Sue, because I know you've also had a history of breaking through in the various organizations you've worked for, and I want to get a bit of your story on that. Let's go to Ken Okoth, the MP of Kibra. Your thoughts on women and leadership. Do you support women in leadership?
Absolutely, absolutely. Actually, I wouldn't say I'm an expert on this issue, and so it's funny to be on this panel, but I support women in leadership, and that's why I'm here. I think the illustrative power, my background is actually in education, getting students through school, getting through students onto college, and I know that the gap in our country, for instance, socioeconomically and cultural factors, the number of girls who start elementary school, primary school, is more than boys. But at the time of finishing class 8,
the numbers have
boys
dropped.
Finish high school and transit on to secondary school more than the girls. And so I think, as without the great number of women in leadership to provide that mentorship and illustrative power of something that girls can see and reach out to, that people they look out to, it doesn't mean too much for a girl in Kibera to tell them, look at Hillary Clinton. They want to see an amazing, fantastic set of women constantly leading in Kenya.
But what has Parliament done to help the women's cause? What is Parliament doing to help the women's cause?
I think we have to make good legislation that's representative of what we need to do. I'm excited as we work on what we need to do today. Our constitution talks about the 2/3 gender rule, that no public body can have more than one, 2/3 of one gender. There has to be that good representation. And so one of the things that I have actually done in the last few months is when there was a raft of suggestions and a bill that the Jubilee administration wanted to push in to basically, for instance, in our police service, to take away the command structure that had that gender requirement. One of the top 3 leaders in our police force has to be a woman by our constitution. And the Jubilee government tried to amend that, and we stopped that in its track, along with things like the NGO bill, which was going to affect a lot of women at the grassroots and at many levels. So that type of thing. But I really think we need to push more, and I want to say positively, the president made some really good starting points, and I wish he could keep up with where he started with women in defense, women in environment.
I'll come back to that in just a moment, and I want to move to the chairperson of the National Gender and Equality Commission, Winnie Lee-Chuma. What's your view of the appointments, especially in public office, the view of the appointments of women, especially in public office? What's your view?
As opposed to Sue, I think we are doing very well as a country. That would be my starting point. At least looking at the statistics where we came from way before the new constitution, and now the affirmative action that has come in through the new constitution, I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
But does affirmative action mean you drop the guard on merit? Is there an issue of merit here? If I was to sit on the other fence, are we seeing more women being appointed perhaps because of who they know, or because of the fact that they can hold their own? I'm talking about public office before we go to private. Are we seeing that? Do you think there's merit?
I think there's merit. I will want to differentiate here twice. we have those political nominations through political parties. And of course, that is a different ball game. And having experienced the first election in this new constitution, it was quite tough for the women. Very, very tough for the women. I saw women, a few of them, the commission has the power to monitor, to advise, and to audit. In few cases, we had to run around the political parties helping women who won the nomination. But the political parties were not going to give them their certificates. And he's aware. So we had those games for political parties. But I want to look back at the other appointive positions. Definitely, colleagues, I want to imagine we have women of substance being appointed to those positions. And remember, the Constitution has the vetting process. So you get appointed, you get through the vetting process through Parliament. And for me, it's sometimes we put the measure very high for women. We become too harsh to the women to say, oh, she cannot deliver. But we know that given a chance, the women make better leaders.
Okay. Do you think, both of you, do you think she's right in terms of sometimes we set the bar a bit too high for women and we're a bit too harsh?
Actually, I would say the risk with affirmative action, which is the first point she started as, is while we want to promote women leadership, especially in public office and public appointments, we cannot afford at the same time to create a system of low expectations, a trap of low expectations. If it's women, their qualifications will be lower. If it's men, their qualifications will be higher. If you go back to education sectors, the young men complaining right now, they're saying to get into Nairobi University to study medicine, I need a certain cutoff point, and the girls will get in at a lower cutoff point. Well, we want everybody to be equally brilliant, and I don't want a surgeon who's not qualified doing my operation. Yeah,
do you think there's an issue when it comes to merit?
I think that, I mean, looking at even the recent results from the KCPE, you see girls performing as well as boys. Yes. We're at par, really. I mean, even as parents, when you have a boy and a girl, you sometimes can see the competitiveness, you know? Yeah. So for me, I think women are competent. And by the way, don't get me wrong on this whole pink progress thing. What we say is, if you're appointing a woman, appoint one on merit. And we shout out that loud and clear because we know there are so many competent women.
Should it be on the same level playing field as men?
I almost think so.
You almost think so?
Not quite.
You still need a bit of conviction.
I mean, and I'm talking from private sector.
Yeah.
You know, purely from private sector. From the political side, I'm not competent to talk about that.
Should it be an equal playing field, men and women?
Not quite.
I think we have to make adjustments. And speaking from the political perspective, I'm a member of the Orange Democratic Party, a party I love and believe stands for many good things. One of the key things that the Orange Democratic Movement has failed in is in promoting women to leadership.
Yeah. So you agree that they failed to promote women in leadership?
Even as we go, and there's been a lot of brouhaha about young people versus older people leading the party. I actually think for ODM to be relevant and win, it has to go at the end of this coming February and make sure we have 2/3 of men in the leadership and 1/3 of the women, or even the other way around to be revolutionary. So I think women in leadership makes a lot of difference and impact. You look at our demographics, more than half of the country is women. We should get there. So I think political parties are being a disadvantage. It's a point she mentioned. Women's access to money for campaigns, it's just not at the same level. So unless we get serious about funding political parties with conditionalities and holding them to the rules, then the political parties right now are free for all. And they behave as they want, and they use whatever funding from whatever sources they have, and they do what they want. But if they're getting state funding, then they must do what's right per the Constitution.
Let me stay with you a bit before I go back to the chairperson. Are women in Parliament freely able to make significant contributions to discussions, to the change in the country? Because sitting on the other side, a lot of people get the sense that A, they don't see enough contribution coming from there. We don't really know. We can only assume. We don't really know what the grounds are. Is there intimidation? Are there derogatory remarks being made towards them? What exactly is happening? Are these women freely able to make contributions and make change in the country? Your colleagues?
My personal perspective is that to really understand the contribution our women leaders are making in the Kenyan parliament, you have to see the work they do in the committees. And we've got women chairing different committees, for example, education, being vice chairs of several committees like the Legal and Judicial Affairs Cons. So they make a huge contribution in those committees. In terms of the amount of airtime you actually see when they're in the huge parliamentary session with the cameras on and public display for television, they might not get as much. You see a few selected faces often and some other women holding back. But I think in the committees that I've worked in, I've seen women's voices heard because it's a smaller group of people, 20, 30 people contributing, and they're very committed. And that's where the hard work of Parliament happens.
All right. Well, we'll hear from Joy Gwendo, of course, nominated senator, and get her views on whether or not she feels like women are heard in Parliament. In terms of the National Gender and Equality Commission, what are you doing to push the agenda? Are there any programs or policies being put in place that are vibrant and visible that can then see women being well represented across the board from your organization?
Exactly, yes. But just let me answer to what you had said. When we look at the representation, I need to say that at the county assembly, at least we got the third representation because of the law. And it wasn't even easy. After the election, the National Gender and Equality Commission had to take IBC to court. Reason being that political parties had played games into the nomination process. And I'm happy that that process then got in a third of the women. Out of the 1,450 seats of the county assemblies, we only had 82 elected women, and we had to nominate 680 at the expense of the taxpayer. And before the election, we went around and told Kenyans there are consequences to not electing women. So, of course, the affirmative action is good enough, but I'm hoping we can move beyond the affirmative action through public education. We need to educate the Kenyans that the women and men equally make good leaders. But let me also say, gender is not about women. Gender is that social construction between the men and the women. And you will note that there are some areas in this country where the boy child now is in need of help. And we're doing a study, and we'll soon be releasing that study to indicate that which area. One of the areas, especially in education, has been Nyeri, for example. And we're just moving to verify that the boy child risks real being below, because a lot of concentration has gone to the girl child at the expense of the boy child. So as we do the balance, we're going to do what the Gender Commission is doing. Firstly, in public bodies, we now have included the indicators of gender mainstreaming, disability mainstreaming within the performance contracting. So all parastatals, all public bodies that sign the performance contracting must submit reports to us indicating their third representation. So it's not going to be that easy. For private sector, we have the equality inclusion project within the private sector. We are looking at the few companies listed on stock exchange.
So there's a few examples.
There are a few examples,
All right. Remember, as the audience, you can engage us. You can use the hashtag MondaySpecialKE on Twitter or SMS us on 22422. Already some of you have been talking. And Sue, I want to throw this to you. George Kinguri on Twitter says, how can women be represented if in the first place they don't have the confidence and courage for these appointments? Is that something that you've seen? You know, you were telling me earlier about your experience. Are women still intimidated about the notion of leadership?
I think they are. A certain number of them are. But we also have some women who are stepping out. They're being bold, you know. And that's why at Pink Progress, really, what we do is we encourage women to step out, get out, speak up, express interest, and serve, because you're smart. And through mentoring them, we're hoping that we can have a lot of those who feel intimidated know that they can do it, you know.
Okay, we're going to take a short break, where then we're going to come back and sample a lot more views and continue